No matter what level you're at as a filmmaker, the one thing that people seem to find overwhelming more than almost anything else is audio. And since for high-level productions, the sound is as, if not more important than the video, this is kind of a problem for anyone trying to take this stuff seriously. With so many options out there, making a decision is harder than ever. So I decided to sit down with an industry veteran location sound recordist and figure out what the best options are at different budgets, starting at the entry level and going all the way up to top-tier gear. We'll start with the best entry-level picks and then go up from there to see what a high-level pro would spend their money on so you can make the right decisions for your own growing sound kit. Good. Little claps are good?
Yeah.
Is that an unknown secret for these DPs out there? You want multiple claps?
You have to clap like 50 times, otherwise it won't sync.
So today we are here with professional sound recordist, on-set sound recordist, Metien Oyebade.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we are on an undisclosed location right now on a 6-week doc shoot, and Metien has been our sound guy, and I know a ton of people out there at different levels struggle with sound gear. It's some of the questions I get most often. People are like, they're getting decent with their cameras and they're starting to go shoot serious stuff, but the audio is just a bit crippling. I thought it would be great to talk to you while I have you because you seem like you're really dialed in. Metien's been like a really easy professional sound person to work with. So we're going to pick his brain right now at what he as a professional would buy at the entry level, mid-level, and then the sort of high-end price point from the perspective of an owner, operator, run and gun DP, because high-end on the sound, like if your
sound level can get very, very deep.
Yeah, out of control. And you were saying there's sort of a point of diminishing returns, right?
Yeah, I think as like a single owner operator, you're not really going to get much out of going to the highest end just because you can't really focus on using it the way it's intended.
Yeah, I think that's good to know because some people might think, oh, I have to buy all this super expensive stuff. So let's go through all the different levels of sound gear and what you would pick. But before we did that, I thought it would be kind of interesting because a lot of people probably watching have maybe not worked on a big crew and maybe aren't thinking that professional sound is even a job.
Yeah.
So how did you get into sound? You know, what are you doing these days?
Well, it is a job. I do make a living somehow. And it does pay pretty well depending on how busy you stay and I think how you've kind of negotiated your business terms. But I got into it kind of in a roundabout way and it was kind of unique. I have a parent in the industry, so that got me in the door as a PA.
Your dad was a DP.
Was a DP, yeah, or is a DP.
Is a DP.
And yeah, I got in the door as a PA, didn't really know what I wanted to do, kind of bounced around on everything, swing PA'd. Just PA'd, office PA'd, kind of the whole run of things.
So your dad was like, I'll help you, but not that much.
No, yeah. He was like, I'll get you a job and then you have to figure it out.
I'll get you the worst job there is. And then if you keep going, then great.
Yeah, 100%. So I kind of got my foot in the door, bounced around different departments. And then part of it was I did actually have an audio engineering background from community college and I got an associate's in that. So sound was like a relevant field, but wasn't something that I wouldn't say I wasn't interested in it, but it wasn't captivating at all.
Yeah.
But I did have an interest and it was on my radar. And I ended up working on a narrative project for 6 months called You. It's a Netflix kind of scripted show. Worked on the 3rd season of that as a PA, and then the sound department just liked me and kind of kept me around. And then it was during COVID, so there was like a COVID emergency with one of the, I think it was the second boom op, had to go fill in on another set, and they gave me a shot. And since then, I've kind of just been doing this. Yeah, I went full in.
It's always the same. You're like around, you're like the man in the arena. You stay around peripherally, you take whatever you take whatever you can get. And then eventually some random chance comes up and they're like, hey, do you want a shot?
Yeah, that's 100% what it was. I was just right place and right time, but for like 6 months. And then I got my opportunity. And then that was kind of big budget union. And I went the other way and don't really do narrative at all anymore. I mainly do like unscripted, doc, reality, kind of anything in that world. Sometimes commercial work, but
And you also shoot, but it's sort of like you can do sound as a bread and butter job. This is something people don't even think of. Location sound is a bread and butter job, and then you're also shooting your own stuff and doing branded stuff on the side.
Yes. Yeah, mostly like motorsport videography, so it kind of all ties together very nicely.
And when we talk about what a good sound operator can charge, what is like just a ballpark of like what sounds like a reasonable rate for someone who knows what they're doing?
I think it definitely depends on location, but like pretty standard. Also depends on the type of work. So like narrative rates can kind of go through the roof, and gear also changes your rate a lot.
If you
own gear, and if you're providing it. I would say a day rate on the lower end can be like anywhere around $500 a day up to maybe $1,000. But there's also tons of opportunities that you'll get, and they're not really opportunities where they'll be like 150 all in. So it kind of goes either way. But I would say you could expect to make six figures if you're working full time or close to it.
I mean, yeah, it's one of those things that people always focus on the cameras, and sometimes like the DP who taught me how to be a DP before we started rolling, I was explaining that he couldn't get a job as a DP when he started, so he did sound for a while, and then eventually transitioned. But you can totally, have this really profitable job in the industry and then do what you want on the side. So.
Yeah, 100%. And also potentially not have enough time to even pursue anything on the side, because depending on where you're at, I find this a lot. There's not a lot of sound people kind of across the states and across the world that are good, or at least have a good network and a good range of gear. So it could work out really well if you're, in a smaller area that doesn't have a big industry of picking it up. But also, if you're not shooting, if there's not a lot of stuff shooting where you live, then it kind of
could be tough. So if you were interested in taking sound seriously or using it as an entry point to the industry or something, how would you get going with that?
I think the way I would do it, and the way I know a lot of people have done it, is just Facebook, like connecting with people through Facebook.
It's useful for something.
It's very useful, yeah. It's worked out. I know probably like 10 people who've kind of started their careers off of Facebook and like being active in forums. And obviously that happened at a time where I think there was like this big boom of work, and it was a lot easier.
Like the pre-COVID boom.
Pre-COVID, yeah. And like it was easier to get work, and there was just more around. But I definitely think if you don't know where to start at all and you don't know a single person, there are like location sound groups on Facebook, kind of general ones like for the whole US. But there's probably one for every country.
Yeah,
I would assume.
I'm sure. Yeah. But are you finding that in general there are opportunities for people getting into sound right now, or is it?
I think there always are. I will say it's tougher. At least in California, it's definitely tougher to break in now than it was a few years ago. There's a lot of qualified sound people, and a lot of them are good. A lot of them have a lot of gear, so it's kind of up to just your network. And I think if you feel like you have an in and like somebody will hire you, it's worth pursuing. But at the same time, you might not work at all. And I know people that haven't worked in a long time, and that's kind of just the state of the industry.
Yeah. Well, California is in its own particular...
It's also in its own...
particular little bind at the moment, right? But it would be interesting. I mean, I don't know, but I think if you had a reputation in any sort of semi-large region, not necessarily in New York, but in, not in the middle of nowhere, but if you were anywhere close to a major production center or somewhere where they're shooting a lot of commercials, if you built up a reputation as sound, I think you might get in there a little bit easier than if you're trying to direct or...
Yes, 100%. And I think part of it too is like a lot of people just don't own the gear. And so if you're good and you have a good amount of gear, or at least you have a way to access gear, then you'll probably work a lot. The one pitfall I think is like, are you going to invest in a kit? Because I think at a pro level, the barrier to entry is pretty expensive.
Pretty high.
You really can't get into it properly for under maybe $15,000 for like a 4 lav kit with some IFBs and a boom. So it does get pretty expensive, and it's kind of a tough investment if you don't know what you're doing and you don't have anybody guiding you.
It might sound like music to the ears of someone who's trying to buy full cinema rig sets.
Yeah.
So maybe it's all relative. But it is true that like in video, the cameras will not help you get a job. Whereas in some ways, sound gear is so much more scarce.
Yeah.
Right? Way fewer people buy mixers and bags and boom poles. So if you have all that stuff, the gear could actually be like a major selling point. But this video isn't about how to become a pro sound person, though. If everyone's interested, maybe we can bring Mehdi back and do like a full dive on how to build out that kind of career. This is really about people who are shooting focused first, maybe directors, small production companies, one-man bands, run and gun crews, things like that, and what kind of things they can get at different price points. So if we started at the bottom, someone who is just starting to get into it, maybe they're buying their first camera, or maybe they're sort of getting their first good mirrorless camera.
Yeah.
And assuming you wanted to shoot sort of run and gun, branded dock style content, what do you think the minimum amount of gear you'd want to get into it with would be?
I think you would want 2 wires.
Wires, you mean?
2 lavs.
Yeah, 2 lav mics,
Yeah, so you want 2 lav mics just to have them. And oftentimes, I think especially in run and gun scenarios, if you're not doing a lot of post work, it ends up sounding better to just put a lav on somebody because you're picking up less ambience. And then I would put some on-camera mic on there, whether it's like an entry-level Rode or a Sennheiser MKE 200 or 400, just enough to give you options and kind of play the field.
Why do you say 2 lavs?
I think 2 is the minimum that you can usually get away with, unless you're doing like a sit-down interview. Usually somebody's talking to somebody else. And if you at least have 2 mics in the field, you can also kind of pick other people off those 2 or whatnot. But I would say 2 is bare minimum, and I wouldn't necessarily go any further than that if you're not really sure how much sound you're gonna run.
Okay, so you've got 2 lavs and a shotgun mic.
Yeah.
What would you recommend for the lavs first? What's a good cheap entry point that doesn't suck?
For lavs, I would say the DJI wireless is pretty good. They have like a full-size version, which you can actually plug like a proper lav wire into, which might be more versatile, or you could also clip it on, as you've probably seen, but I would advise trying to hide a mic. Although,
please hide the mics. Please hide the mics.
Sometimes, and this might be controversial, is that I always think exposed mics sound better just because they're not under layer fabric, so there's no risk of clothing noise, and sometimes it's not worth hiding it for what it is, but it does strongly depend. Like
sometimes you broadcast or...
Yeah, like it can maybe be in the open, maybe a social clip if like the brand is okay with it or if that's what they're used to. And if you're running an actual lav wire, I think exposing them half of the time, as long as you're not doing like a doc or an unscripted thing or a narrative thing. Definitely can't show it for any narrative.
So when would you show it? It sounds like all of the best things.
I think for some corporate stuff, I would show it. Yeah, like if you were doing a corporate thing or maybe like a broadcast like type coverage, I would show it just because you know it could never go wrong. Anything that's potentially like an on-stage kind of interview or like talk show format, I would expose them just because if you know that you can't stop down to adjust it, it's safer to have the mic in the open and it will sound better 100% of the time.
Right, so, but most of the time it'll also destroy your story. You see it, so anything like, I would say for a doc, always hidden.
Yeah, I would say always hide it.
Movie, always hidden. And for most commercials too, right?
Yeah, I think in most applications you would want to hide it. So I wouldn't just stick the DJI on the outside. And it is nice that the bigger one does have a little input so that you could actually wire somebody up properly. The DJI Mic Mini is a good, like, very budget alternative. I think they go for under $300. I have it. I can pull it out.
Yeah, you have it over here.
These are pretty great. So they come in a charging case, which is nice. I've never charged this, and I've had it for 3 months. Yeah, they're kind of like AirPods.
They're still full.
They're still full, yeah. It's been 3 months. They come with 2 mics and a receiver.
These are the mini ones?
Yeah, the minis. They've got windscreens. Yeah, you can clip them. There's a magnet which you could stick on. So what I've done with these is I've done magnet on the outside of the shirt and then stuck the mic on the inside and clipped it. And provided it doesn't weigh the shirt down or like bulge out too much, that is an alternative to hide them.
I mean, it's pretty amazing. I would still just hate to see this anywhere, but
yeah,
pretty cool. You could just throw this on, and these are not the ones that accept mics, right?
These don't accept mics, but they sound pretty good just how they are. And then they have a little on-camera receiver that just plugs in through a 3.5. And they sync automatically, so you don't have to worry about frequencies or anything. I think they can accept any 3.5. I'm not 100% sure on that. So I don't know if you can pair it with like the full range of everything. But I think like a very good entry-level lav is the Countryman B3.
Okay.
They're pretty small. They have a smaller counterpart, the B6, but those are about like $400 a mic. B3s are maybe in the 200 range, and they're water
probably
resistant.
More than the DJIs, but they're arguably more important.
Actually, I think the DJIs are like probably $400 for the set.
Getting more expensive.
You're at like about 400. These ones were like around 300. And then about $200 a wire if you're going to go that way. And then you just have to make sure that the connector is the same. But those are good. And I would say those wires, those lavs themselves, could take you all the way up to the professional level. So you could always pair those with a better transmitter later down the line.
How do you physically attach those? This is where I see a lot of people going wrong. How do you physically attach those wired mics in a simple way? Not like with using really professional techniques or just assuming someone has a standard shirt and there's no place to hide it in a sneaky spot. Where would you put it and how would you attach it?
So I would say as far as the actual transmitter goes, you could just throw it in a pocket. If there is a belt clip on it, you could clip to a belt. The only risk with belts is sometimes the clips aren't very good. And I'm guilty of clipping to a belt and then it falls off like in the middle of something. And I feel like it's my fault, but it's also just not because the clips usually aren't very good. If you're doing more advanced stuff and you absolutely can't see it, you could purchase like waist straps, ankle straps, but that is kind of a bit much.
Yeah.
As far as attaching it, the basics is to do like a little moleskin sandwich, which I could demo for you. Got my little mic kit.
This is very pleasing.
Let's use one of these Sures. So
we're gonna demonstrate the proper technique using like maybe the most expensive
expensive wire, most likely. This is a DPA 6060.
This is like a $3,500 mic.
Yeah, all in all, I think transmitter and wire, this is probably $4,000, close to it.
Yeah, so
maybe a little bit
more expensive than 2 of the cameras we're shooting on.
Yeah, they get very pricey. So right now I do have like a little wind fuzzy. So if it is windy at all, and my general rule of thumb is if I am shooting outside, always wind protect the mics, even if it isn't windy. So this is just a little like rye coat fuzzy.
It's so tiny.
It's teeny. Yeah.
Okay.
Trash. But I would usually run that, and I guess I could do 2 like wiring demonstrations, one where...
Well, we'll save. We won't go too deep into it because I've already done a video on wiring before.
Okay.
Sign up for the cinematography course. Get your wiring video right in there. But just generally, like, what are some low friction ways that someone could just get that onto a character
very quick and easy,
not be worried about it falling off?
So my usual practice, if I had almost nothing, you really just want 3 things. Some sort of wind protection, so like a rye coat, like little softy. You can get a pack of them for $10, $20. And then I'll do this a little bit bigger than I actually would with this wire. But you're gonna wanna have some sort of soft, like fuzzy tape. So either Ursa makes like specific tape for mics. There's a couple other companies that do it. But you could go as simple as just getting moleskin from like CVS, which is a pretty like tried and true strategy, and it is the old school way of doing it. But you'd basically just sandwich this mic. So you'd put tape over on one side, and then little piece of tape right here. And this is a little messier than I would actually do it.
It's like almost like a homemade version of that little rubber.
Yeah, the little rubber mount. It just sandwiches it like that. And then I would get a piece of super stick. So super stick is just double-sided tape. It might be wig tape. I'm not 100% sure.
Toupee tape works as well.
Yeah. Top stick is another big one. Super stick is the strongest. So that usually won't come off. Top stick on like certain clothes may. But I would say those are like the two basic things that I would 100% recommend getting. And then maybe like moleskin from CVS or Walgreens or whatever, and just slap it right on the back. And then as far as miking goes, placement I think is the most important. And it's something that I still struggle with is like, I've mic'd the same t-shirt 100 times, but on the 99th time, it'll just sound terrible. There's never an exact science, but something like this is pretty low friction and low profile. And then I would mount this kind of depending on what they're wearing. So if it's a t-shirt, usually you want to be somewhere like center chest, but it shows on the fabric a lot. And I usually try to mic to fabric, not to skin, just because people could sweat and it could fall off. And yeah, it also doesn't usually sound as good just because you have layers traveling over the actual mic, whereas if it's on the fabric, it's traveling with the layer. So I usually mic to fabric, and then I just try to find a spot where I know it'll sound good and it won't show too much. So this is a black shirt. It probably wouldn't show a ton if it was right here, but you would see some sort of a square. So I actually mic'd myself up to the collar, which doesn't usually sound as good, but it hides better and is also often safer just sound-wise because there's less movement up here than there is down here. In your case, with button-up shirts, it's actually very easy. Yeah. I usually put it through the folds right here and have it poke out this way. And since these mics are omnidirectional, it doesn't matter which way I'm pointing. But yeah, it can kind of range depending on what people are wearing. I would say there is no exact answer, and the best thing is to place it and then listen to it and test it and see if it's actually working, because just assuming has gone wrong for me a million times.
It's fine. And then, so we've got the DJI mics with a Countryman entry level. And then what would you do for the shotgun?
For the shotgun, I guess it depends on your camera.
Say you have a mirrorless.
But if you're like on a mirrorless camera, I would say like a Sennheiser MKE 400 is a good starting
little
point.
Black one, right?
Yeah, it's like pretty short black one. They also have a 200, which isn't great, but if you're absolutely pinching pennies, then that could be the way to go.
Okay. So then moving up to the middle tier, like there's no easy way to define this, but say middle tier is people who are working, they're taking it seriously, they're making money, they're starting to invest in gear, and they're trying to grow a business, right? Yeah. It's not so much a hobby anymore. What would you recommend then as a workable kit?
I would say, I think first thing is maybe stick with what you know works. So if the DJIs are working great for you and you don't have a real reason to upgrade, maybe wait and save that money until you can. But a good step up would be like cheaper wireless, like Sennheiser G4s. G3s also are still working and like you could use them.
I have my G3s from 2013.
Yeah, and still kicking.
Still going.
Yeah, I mean, I see them all the time still. You might start to encounter frequency issues, although you were saying they've been kind of solid for you. And that is like always my biggest concern is one, somebody's outfit, and two, frequencies. But in a case where you're kind of a single operator and following people closely, range shouldn't be a huge issue just because you're right there anyway. So like a G3, I would still pair that with something like a Countryman B3, although if you want to go to better mic, there is like a Cost 11 is kind of...
Sanken.
Yeah, Sanken Cost 11 is the best kind of all-around lav I think that you would ever need, and I don't think that you would need to upgrade from there. Like major narrative productions and commercials all the way to reality TV shows. I would say they're probably $400 a wire. So pretty expensive.
I mean, the Sankens, I think I can just recommend wholeheartedly. Like I own maybe 5 of them, and they are very hard to break. Actually, you know, I work on the show alone, and that's what they give those guys up there in the middle of the woods starving. And they don't break them as much as you'd think.
Yeah.
So I think those are a great place.
Yeah.
They're expensive, but they last forever and they sound really good and they're easy to hide. So we've got our lavs covered, and then you're saying still keep 2 of those, but what happens if at that level you might start to get additional characters?
Yeah.
What would you do there?
I think if you're going beyond 2, just because most cameras only have 2 dedicated XLR inputs, and one of those is probably going to be for your shotgun anyway, I would say it makes more sense to have the rest of the players not on wireless and have some kind of standalone recorder. And kind of the best option for that now is the Tentacle Track E. They're pretty good. They have like 10 hours of battery life. They're super easy to use. They timecode sync wirelessly. So that's kind of the best alternative. The only downside is you can't monitor while recording. So it's kind of like you mic them, you roll, and then you just
you can, but you have to plug headphones into your phone and go through the app, and it's just kind of not very good, right?
Well, it won't let you do it while you're rolling.
Oh,
yeah. So you can only listen to it before. So like you could mic check somebody, but as the moment you hit roll, you can't listen to it anymore.
There are other options, but I honestly think, I don't think it's worth even recommending them, because the Tentacles are, I think at that price point, they work so well, they never fail. They're great.
Yeah. I don't think I'd recommend anything else. Like there are other options, but they either have like some major component that they're missing. Like most recorders won't have timecode then, or there won't be an app to kind of monitor or listen to. So I think in that range, I think they're about $300-$400 a unit. Mm-hmm.
That's
kind of the best option there.
Yeah.
And you could always rent them if they're available.
Yeah, never sleep on rentals. And I think it's important to note that what you just described, I think I'm a little past the sort of midpoint in my career at this point, but that's still the audio kit that I'm rolling with. I invested in it at the time you're talking about, but I never needed to go bigger than that.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a lot of the time when I have 3 pairs of G3s and 3 Tentacles and 2 Tentacle timecode boxes. And that does everything I need, even for really big productions.
Yeah.
So
I think that's kind of as far as you'd want to go. And anything past that, you probably need to have a sound mixer on set. But yeah, I think that's kind of the peak. Anything more than that, you're kind of complicating your workflow. And
what if you you really wanted to go one step further and you wanted just like, not necessarily pro sound gear best, but even one step more luxurious than that? Oh, we didn't establish what the shotgun would be at that price point.
I think the shotgun at that price point is tough because there are a lot of options. I think if you can afford a 416
Sennheiser.
Yeah, Sennheiser 416, that's kind of the furthest you would want to go anyway. That's kind of the best, like, one mic for every scenario shotgun that there is. So if you can go for a 416, there are also cheaper options. Audio-Technica makes some that don't sound as good and aren't necessarily as robust, but those will work.
That 416 is impossible to break.
Yeah, you can't break them. I've broken one, but I was like in a scenario where I had to boom in the rain. I didn't have like a proper Zeppelin over it, and I was booming in the rain for like 4 hours. So they're tough to break, yeah.
Yeah, and it probably came from like the XLR cable and shorting it out the back.
Yeah, I probably got in somewhere.
So 416 is great. It's quite long.
It is quite long. I think if you're in a similar budget, you can get shorter mics. So like there is the Sanken CS1, which I don't personally have experience with, but I know people are running them on cameras. A similar form factor to that would be the Sennheiser 8060, but you are getting into the like 1,000+ territory on that.
And then, you know, maybe a little more affordable even than that would be, we were talking about Rode NTG3s maybe.
Yeah, that probably puts you in like closer to $500 maybe if you're playing used, and then brand new like $700. So like an NTG3 would be great. And I think also at some point with a shotgun on camera, you're gonna get limited in how useful it actually is because proximity is the most important thing. And I would recommend in an intermediate position potentially getting a boom just to throw on a C-stand or something if you can for interviews, because having a closer mic is better 100% of the time.
It really did. I don't know why, but because maybe they were expensive when I first bought them, I thought the lavs were the better mics. But then obviously the lav mic is this big and the shotgun mic is this big. So I didn't really get it. You're much better off bringing your shotgun mic very close than using your lavs, even though there's some distance from the camera.
100%. Although setting also does matter for that, because if we were somewhere that's really loud, I would say the lavs are going to sound better usually, but also now with all like the post-processing AI tools that there are, you can kind of get away with a lot. So it does depend.
Isotope is insane.
Isotope is insane.
One-stop clicks on removing crazy noise that would have been complete project enders not very 100%. Long ago.
Yeah.
Another question that a lot of people at this level have is whether or not you should buy an external recorder. When I was first getting in, I came from photojournalism, and there was this big trend of multimedia photo slideshows. That was going to be the thing that saved documentary photography. So everyone rushed out and bought Zooms. So I have one of these Zoom H4s, and I sometimes use it. But do you think that is an important investment for shooters?
It depends, because I'm almost at that crossroads right now where like I'm shooting stuff myself and I'm thinking like I want more tracks available, but I don't really want to like full send into a $4,000 mixer that like isn't really going to pay itself back. I think it depends on how often you need like a higher track count. But I think at any point where you need more than 2 channels and you need to split it out in post, I would get a mixer. But kind of tough, because as a single operator, it is more gear. And I think it would almost be a drawback, just because if you don't set it up correctly, then you're not getting anything out of it really. And like, there's no real way to carry it with you. So
I've experimented in the past with like the pouch with the recorder and it's just it's so hard to actually monitor and keep track of that you essentially need to give it to someone else, which then is essentially a sound person. I found the most use of them, the most I'm using it now is just plugging it straight into mixing boards and things at live events. You get there and you have a recorder and you just plug an XLR cable into it and you grab feeds. That's sort of been the only way I've used it.
Yeah, I agree. I think to have it might be nice, like a simple 4-track, like a Zoom would be great, just because if you ever do need it, you have it there.
The good news is they're cheap.
And they're very cheap,
Like a used H4 is like, I don't even know, $100 now? They're pretty cheap.
There really isn't a step up from there to like pro grade. Like what I'm using on this, the sound devices, I can pull it out. Ugh. This sound devices Mix Pre 10 is like the only kind of entry-level mixer, and even that's like starts at $2,000. So you're getting a ton out of it, and this is giving you like maybe 90% of what something at a higher price point would give you, but at that lower price point. But it's a huge jump from like $100 Zoom, and if you're not really gonna use this, there isn't really a point in investing in it.
Okay, so at the extreme high end, then, say you wanted to not quite professional sound, but say you thought that the Sennheisers were a little too flimsy, or maybe you wanted something even more compact and sort of easier to work with. What would be like the very top end that you think makes sense for a DP or an operator?
Okay. I think I actually might throw out a recommendation that isn't completely vetted on my end, but you could use, if you're in the US, one of the biggest issues I think for sound is not being able to transmit audio and record at the same time if you're using any gear other than Zaxcom specifically. So you could go for like a Zaxcom wireless package, because you can use both. In other countries though, like Canada and Europe, you can do both, I believe, because there isn't like patent infringement there.
It's country dependent.
It is country dependent. So I would say if you're in the US, and that is a really big selling point to you, you could go Zaxcom. I personally have only used Zaxcom like 3 times, and I didn't love their stuff.
I've used it a lot. When I was in AC, I was responsible for dealing with maybe like 7 or 8 Zaxcoms every night. And I would say like what they do, Zaxcom is a type of audio lav that also records internally. It's like a very expensive tentacle.
Yeah.
And I would say the build quality is great, but the usability, the user experience is very annoying.
Yeah.
And it uses proprietary software. That means when you're trying to back it up every night, you have to do an extra step, and it's not worth it for me.
It's a lot of work. I think my drawback with them is for Zaxcoms to be worth it, all of your wireless has to be Zaxcom gear, and like mixing and matching kind of defeats the point. But if that's important to you, that is an option.
Like if you're doing reality shows.
If you're doing reality or even dock stuff where you know that you need to have audio on people, but they're running off like 200 feet away and you just can't get range on them, that could be useful. But if you're in another country, it is possible that Lectrosonics will offer both, or even WheezyCom. And I've used both of their wireless, kind of their whole range. And it's all good. It's all pro grade. It's all very reliable. I've obviously had some stuff fail on me, but it's kind of hard to tell when something's 20 years old or 10 years old why. But I would say Lectrosonics is kind of the best wireless lav just company that is out there, and they have a wide range of stuff. And I wouldn't even really have a specific thing to recommend from them, just anything that's in your budget. Their newer stuff gets kind of top price point, like $2,000, $3,000 a transmitter, and then probably with a receiver, that's another $3,000. So it does get expensive, but all of that's available used.
Sometimes rental houses snatch that stuff up.
Sometimes they snatch them up quick. It's definitely easier in a big city where there's a ton of sound people selling their gear.
Yeah.
If you can find Lectrosonics, I would say that's the next step up in just build quality and wireless quality. Or stick with G3s or go up to G4s or something along those lines. Zaxcom is an option as well. And that's kind of all I've really worked with. There is WheezyCom, but that's a bit more niche.
Yeah.
And is also expensive, and I feel like a little bit more delicate.
What about for the shotgun?
For a shotgun, I don't think I'd go further than a 416.
What about the Shups mics? People make a big fuss out of those.
I really like the CMIT and the mini CMIT. They sound great. You kind of varying results on how they sound when they're far. Sometimes they sound really great when they're kind of far away from people. Sometimes they don't. I think the only reason why I wouldn't recommend it as an all-rounder is they are kind of delicate and they're super expensive. So I don't think you would get much more out of it, but also they're great mics, and I wouldn't say don't buy it. And if it's in the budget, you can. I just don't know how much use you would get out of it. Although the form factor on the small CMIT is great.
Yeah.
Although the full-size one is like this long. So you're not.
Yeah, because the 416 on the Burano and the FX9, I find it okay, but on I guess the FX6, it's all right, but it starts to stick pretty far out.
Big,
yeah.
I think if you want to go shorter, an 8060 is a good move.
Sennheiser.
Yeah, Sennheiser 8060 or the Sanken CS1 is also the same size. I just don't know how it sounds, but it's probably good.
It's probably good. I'm assuming it's good.
All of Sanken's stuff sounds good, so I'm pretty sure it's good. Yeah.
Cool. Well, those are 3 different price points and 3 different packages that I think make a lot of sense and are very much in line with my own experience in the industry. I think having sound on set is a luxury and maybe, unfortunately, probably one of the first positions to get cut if budget starts to become an issue. But it is so worth it if you can, especially as a shooter or a director or a do-it-all person. Like, taking audio off your plate makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And in docs and anything story-driven, audio is as important, if not more important, than the picture for telling the story. Like, you can get around rough video as long as you have solid audio. So knowing that, when we walk into this location, we're working with a family, knowing that the entire family is covered for, extremely good sound, I can just focus on my job. So it's always worth pushing for, though. You might not get your way, but if possible, sound on location is great. And
Yeah.
hire Meti if you are anywhere in the US or anywhere in the world, I guess, for that matter.
International, wherever.
Get do you have a company name, or how do people find you online?
I don't have a company name. I don't know. I'm trying to think about the best way to contact me.
All your work just comes.
I can't blast my email out there.
Let's put your personal email and phone number on the screen below.
Right here, right above my
Check
social.
the link in the description for Meti's personal cell number and ask him all the questions you want about why your mics aren't working.
Just flood me.
Just flood you.
I don't really have a company, I guess.
Can people hire you, or are you just so busy from work?
No, you can't hire me. I guess you would have to reach out to Luke, and then if he ever saw the message, he could somehow come down to me, but probably not.
Disappear into that giant inbox. Okay, cool. So Meti's too busy to work for you. So it's a good advertisement for how much work there is out there in sound.
Yeah.
Doesn't even need doesn't need a website, doesn't need any promotion.
Don't need anything. Just find me somehow.
Do a great job. Don't be weird, and have gear.
Yeah, don't be weird. That's definitely important. I know a lot of good sound mixers that are not getting hired because they're weird.
Sound is a notorious
there is a bit of
the socially awkward. That's probably going to trigger some people, but there is that stigma of like, oh man, I hope the sound guy's not weird.
Yeah. And I've met many weird ones. There's been many days where like I do
face palming off camera, you're going to get canceled.
Do a multi-sound team, and I'm just like, oh gosh.
I'm the only normal one here.
Yeah. But fortunately, many of the people I surround myself with are very normal, and there are normal and cool sound people out there. So
it's very true. I actually haven't had any of those bad experiences. I've always I can't really think of any sort of terrible sound experiences, but there is a definite stigma in there somewhere.
Yeah, and they exist. They're out there.
Yeah.
But
not this guy. So you can't hire him, but know that he's out there. All right. Thanks, Meti. That was a great talk. And let me know below what you guys are using and at what price point, or what your sort of sound aspirations are. See ya.